Hello everyone, my name is Rita Excel and I'm the Executive Director of the Australia and New Zealand Driverless Vehicle Initiative, ADVI. Thank you so much for joining us in this latest ADVI Connect webinar series, where I'm very excited to introduce to you some world-leading experts around public attitudes. As you would know, ADVI's been running the longest running public attitude survey for Australia and New Zealand. We've been running our survey since 2016, but we've been watching and monitoring what the rest of the world's doing in relation to these public attitude surveys, and we're really pleased to bring you some insights from our friends from Japan and from the United States. I just wanted to make a couple of announcements around the format. So we will be hearing from Ms. Miyake from the Daiichi Life Research Institute in Japan first. Then I'll throw to the ARRB team, who have been running the ADVI, the fourth wave of the ADVI survey, and throwing to that team. And then we'll anchor it with Devin Gladden from the AAA and hear what the sentiments are in the US. We will leave some time for questions, so please use the questions bar. Yeah, we'll definitely try to get to all of your questions today. I do want to acknowledge that the ADVI partnership is supported and funded by our core funding partners, ARRB, Volvo Cars, Transurban, Transport for New South Wales, Lifetime Support Authority, Fortescue Metals Group, and Telstra. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Ms. Yukiko Miyake. Ms. Miyake is the General Manager and Executive Researcher at the Life Design Research Department of the Daiichi Life Research Institute. And we're very pleased to meet you in Australia in 2019. When you visited Australia with the Technova delegation. And the world's changed since late 2019, but it was great to make that connection. We heard about the great work that the Daiichi Life Research Institute was doing in Japan, and we really wanted to share that with you. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Rita. Can you see my presentation slide? Is it okay?
Yes, we can. All good.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and it's good to see you all here. And I appreciate ADVI and Technova to give me an opportunity to join this webinar today. Let me just start by introducing myself. My name is Yukiko Miyake from Daiichi Life Research Institute. I'm a general manager and executive researcher of Life Design Department, and I'm in charge of research about people's thinking and attitude as a consumer. It is including the attitude towards the technology like communication device and automated driving. Now I'm doing a large-scale annual questionnaire survey as a national research project. So today I would like to show you some of the results. There are 4 sections in this presentation. A brief explanation about the situation of technology and regulation of automated driving in Japan at first. There's some background about our surveys for second. 3 subjects through the questionnaire survey. Then I'd like to show you my opinion as a conclusion. First of all, I'm going through the situation of automated driving in Japan. A legal framework for SAE Level 3 was completed with law amendments in April 2020. And as you may know, we have Honda Legend on expressway already, and some automated driving transport services on public road are in deployment. In this section, I'll explain about our research. This shows where our survey is positioned. We started a large-scale survey for consumers since 2017, and the first survey was done by my company with 12,000 and 3,000 samples each nationwide. Then the annual survey with more than 12,000 samples has started in 2019 as a government project. From 2020, SIP ADAS project, which is a national program to realize scientific and technological innovation in Japan, joined this survey from the Cabinet Office. So we got the annual data for 3 years as a national project. So in addition to these researches, we got some qualitative data, including complements for our data from local residents through interviews and workshops. This shows the contents of surveys. We asked several questions, including the residential mobility service situation and car usage in everyday life first, and then we asked about automated driving. In this section, I'm going to show you some of our results. Here, I would like to draw your attention to 3 points. First, the situation of people's expectation and anxieties for social change brought through the development and spread of automated driving. Second, the recognition and utilization of driving assistance features and the understanding of driving assistance features by their users. Third, the factors of social acceptance of automated driving. I'd like to explain about each of them one by one. First of all, let's see the situation of people's expectation and anxieties about the automated driving in Japan. To get straight to the point, the situation has not changed for these 4 years. A little less than 70% have expectations and less than 15% have anxiety. The problem is the people who have neither expectation nor anxieties because they don't have any interest in automated driving at all. We would better take them into our argument about the automated driving because mobility is a matter of all of us and we are sharing public roads. Driving assistant features are already spread, and we think automated driving is following as an extension of them. So we asked people about the recognition and utilization of them. What we asked are collision mitigation brake, system to prevent acceleration in case of wrong pedal depression, cruise control, inter-vehicle distance control system, lane keeping assistance control system, and parking assistance system. The recognition of these features has increased, but the utilization has not increased drastically. Only about half of these who use vehicles equipped with these features are aware of these features or actually use them. So why they don't use them? It's because the understanding of driving assistance features by their users is not enough. I'd like to draw your attention to this slide. Only about 13% of the respondents understood well each feature after receiving explanations. Moreover, 30 to 40% of the respondents do not fully understand each feature. If you don't understand how to use the system, you will not feel the merit and increase the risk of misuse. The voice of pioneering users known as innovators and early adopters will have a significant impact on the use of the product by other consumers. Therefore, we believe that it is important to current users to use the product correctly and safely, and to properly experience its effects. For thinking about the social acceptance of automated driving, I divide it into 4 factors as lifestyle change, learning, cost, and uniqueness technical limit. Lifestyle change is like, for example, to accept the new rules, mutual assistance among passengers, let go of private car, need to go to bus stop to use the automated driving bus, and so on. Learning is that we need to understand the usage, new rules, liabilities, and features. Cost is very simple. We have to pay more or to use their tax to set up the infrastructure and so on. Uniqueness technical limit is that we should accept that the automated driving is not 100% safe, not run fast as a normal bus, stop very often to check the surrounding safety, and so on. According to the result, lifestyle change and learning could be acceptable, but cost and uniqueness technical limit are not. In fact, the biggest matter of the anxieties of automated driving is about reliability of the cars. That means people would better understand the technology and its limit clearly to use it efficiently and safely. Now I will move on to the final section and talk about my opinion. Here I would like to draw your attention to 3 points. Point 1 is in interest. Consumers' expectations and anxieties about automated driving have remained unchanged over the last few years, and their interest has been stalled. Point 2, experience and advanced technologies. Some driving assistant functions, such as ACC and AEB, are already widespread in Japan. It's a way of experiencing advanced technologies. However, it is difficult for users to experience and understand its effectiveness, and it's also difficult to expect its ripple effects. Point 3, willingness and reluctance. Consumers are willing to try new service and learn new rules, but less receptive to the uniqueness and technical limitations to automated driving, and are particularly anxious about technology. This slide is the process for forming acceptance of automated driving. We believe it necessary to provide information about how to spread the automated driving from the beginning. We do not have the answer anyway. However, we can provide the information about what is the automated driving and why is it required in its locality at first. How is depend on the situation of each people, like age, gender, lifestyle, circumstance, and local geographical situation. It means how is what each residents and local community do come up with themselves when sufficient information is provided. I'll introduce a case we tried. We held a workshop to elementary school students. They were in 6th grade in Okinawa Prefecture in early 2020. They had not heard or learned about automated driving before, so we provided them about why the automated driving is required now in Japan and what the automated driving is. After that, we tried to get on the automated driving. It was their first time, so they were so excited. After their test riding, we discussed about how to use the automated driving safely and efficiently in their area. What can you do as a user? To my surprise, they suggested many appropriate ideas by themselves. It is almost the same that we normally present as the information of how. They thought by themselves and suggested how they should use automated driving safely. I felt that to think about how is a matter of person who live each area. The important thing to elevate the acceptance of automated driving is to make some opportunities to think and touch about real information of automated driving. So, to think about how, what is the point? I presented 4 factors about the acceptance of automated driving. The most important factor that we should consider is uniqueness, technical limit, I think. I have another impressive case in Japan. The automated driving service car at Sakai-machi in Ibaraki Prefecture is one of the successful cases. So why is it succeeded? It's because mobility service provider and citizens are trying to create the automated driving society together. The people understand the features of automated driving bus and their technical limit well. So citizens are helping to keep their new mobility and safety through providing their private space for bus stops, monitoring the getting on and off of children voluntarily, and keeping the on-street parking to keep the frequency driving of automated driving bus. It means to elevate the acceptance is not only the task of service providers or government, but also the task of citizens. In fact, we are getting some interesting results. This shows the awareness of local residents and acceptability of automated driving. As a whole trend, the higher the awareness of local residents, the higher the score of each component of social acceptance. It means that areas in which residents are actually involved in the community can make automated driving work better. So what can we conclude from those findings and cases? I'd like to show this final slide. This shows each roles of acceptance and co-creation of automated driving society. Business entities are the ones who create technologies and services. The national and local governments are responsible for developing the laws and rules to run automated driving. Universities and research institutions conduct specialized research in each area to deepen their knowledge. And we believe that it is the consumers themselves who will make the automated driving society to work. We commonly refer to this as consumer acceptance. However, the question is not from the perspective of getting consumers to accept it, but from the perspective of how to involve them and develop technologies and systems together. I think it is an important point. In order to work this structure, we should make the place for co-creation with these players like the opportunity of demonstration, experiment, workshops, citizens dialogue, symposium, or some committee. Of course, today's webinar is also the great opportunity of co-creation. I really appreciate to join this webinar and love to keep in touch to create for the automated driving society from now on. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yukiko. That's amazing. And I think that co-creation and having that social implementation is really critical to that. And whilst we see a lot of technology being developed by researchers, it's really important to get the community on board as soon as possible. And yeah, so thank you very much. And it's very interesting. We'll have some questions for you when we finish all the other presentations. So thank you, everyone. I would now like to introduce the team at ARRB that's been supporting this wave of the ADVI Public Opinion Survey. It's been led by Dr. Niraj Saxena, who's led this work, and it's been supported by our researchers, Francis Chong and Amolika. And thank you very much for this team. They've all taken a different lens across the significant data sets that we have historically and the new data sets. And this year, we've included some questions around the impacts of COVID. And I think that that'll be something very interesting. And also we're going to hear about, you know, what are the gender differences around male and female opinions. So I'd like to hand over to Niraj if you want to lead us off.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Rita. My name is Dr. Niraj Saxena, and I'll be presenting some high-level findings from the public opinion surveys that we have derived during our analysis. So as Rita mentioned, it's a longitudinal survey which is conducted across Australia and New Zealand. The statistics are shown on the slides. It's an extensive questionnaire comprising 75 plus questions, with the most recent version, which is the Wave 4, also including COVID-19 related questions, how COVID-19 has affected people's perceptions towards AVs and their lifestyle in general. I'll be presenting the trend analysis that was conducted using all the 4 iterations of the public opinion survey. And one of the questions, a very interesting finding that we observed was a lack of confidence in using fully automated cars. A question that was asked during this question, the survey was, the participants were asked whether they believe that an automated car would be safer than a human-driven vehicle. And the graph shows that while there was a decline in the mean average response scores from wave 1 to wave 3, there has been a slight increase in that aggregate response during the wave 4. And we also see that 13% of the respondents on average across the 4 waves strongly agreed that AVs would be safer than manually driven vehicles. However, this proportion is just 1/10 of the entire data, which is probably showing that this level of agreement is still in its development stage. Continuing on the similar concept of lack of confidence, another question which was asked was the participants' propensity to use an automated car manually from time to time if they were allowed to do so. And we saw that 40% of the respondents on average across the 4 waves strongly agreed to using an autonomous vehicle manually from time to time. It could be because of their hesitation in using autonomous systems or their love for driving. Continuing on a similar theme, which is lack of confidence, there were a couple of questions which were asked regarding vehicle security and data privacy. On this slide, you are seeing the response to the question of how concerned the participants were with respect to car security, which is the scenario where the hackers take control of the car. We see that the average mean response scores are close to 3, which is the level of concern, and see that there has been a declining trend from 78% to 70% during wave 1 to wave 4 respectively in the number of people who are very concerned or concerned regarding their car security. While we do see a drop in this percentage from wave 1 to wave 4, the percentage, around 70% of the people still have that sentiment, which is probably quite high. Lastly, about data privacy, participants were then asked a question: how concerned or unconcerned would they be with respect to data privacy, which is not being in a situation where their movement and location or destination would be able to be tracked. And again, 70% of the respondents across the 4 waves were concerned or very concerned about data privacy with respect to autonomous vehicles. I'll now hand it over to my colleague, Francis Cheong, for the rest of the findings from the ADVI Opinion Service.
Thanks very much, Niraj. So yeah, I guess I'll start with talking about some of the data that we looked at comparing the 3rd iteration of the ADVI Public Opinion Survey, which we did in 2019, versus the 4th iteration, which we did in early this year. So obviously a few differences between those times. So the first one that we looked at was to do with ownership and experience with cars with ADVI functions. So this graph covers all the 4 waves, but I just want to draw your attention particularly to the comparison between wave 3 and wave 4. So we saw that the number of respondents who owned a car with 1 or more of these functions increased across all the functions from ADVI 3 to ADVI 4. So that was automatically adapting to changing speed limits, the vehicle staying within its own lane, the ability to park itself, etc., that are listed there. So we saw ownership increase across all those functions, and we also see, looking at this graph, that general awareness and knowledge and experience with and personal use of these low-level automation functions is also increasing. Next slide, please, Niraj. The willingness to use and pay for AV transport modes. So looking at these graphs, we saw a decrease in the number of respondents in the 4th iteration of the survey that were just as likely to use the public transport or rideshare options, whether it was a fully automated vehicle or a connected vehicle, compared to the conventional unconnected transport options. So which means that we thought that more people were either much more likely or much more unlikely or more unlikely to use these options. And we think that a majority of that decrease could be linked to a significant increase in the willingness to pay towards these fully automated public transport or rideshare service options. Next slide, please, Niraj. Cool. So time spent driving. I think this is one that's probably particularly relevant over the past couple of years. So we saw the similar percentage of responses across the different times that people were spending driving on average each week across the 2 waves. But we did see that from ADVI 3 to ADVI 4, for the amount of people that were driving no hours on average each week, there was quite a large increase. I think we sort of expected this, because of the shift to working from home or studying from home arrangements that people have, and the various lockdowns that are experienced across Australia and New Zealand as well, and also loss of employment. So it wasn't that too much of a surprise to us. Next slide, please, Niraj. So as you mentioned earlier, in the 4th iteration of the survey, we actually added in some questions that were specifically related to COVID-19. And this was around, about travel patterns, how much people were driving, different modes of transport, people's level of comfort with different transport modes, how their international state travel had differed, and how people's support levels of these different levels of automation had changed due to the pandemic. So some of the main results we found here is this is to do with level of comfort. As I said, we sort of expected to see that, people were driving less, so driving their cars less, and also taking public transport less and using rideshare services less. And we also saw that people became a lot more comfortable with driving by a car, but also contrasting that they became less comfortable with taking public transport and using rideshare services. And we do think this is due to, the general fears of either contracting the virus, and, the whole thing with social distancing and being around other people was a big factor. So next slide, please, Niraj. And just the last point about overall support of automated vehicles due to COVID, we saw that 33% of the respondents, someone agreed or strongly agreed that due to the pandemic, they were more supportive of private transport, and also very similar to public transport too. So that's it from me. I'll pass over to Malika.
Thank you, Francis. So in this section, I'll be discussing about the ADVI 4 insights to the preferences based on gender. So in the first slide, we'll be looking into the overall preference across all the gender, and we found that there is a lack of confidence in using fully automated car, which echoes with what Neeraj and Francis told before. Majority of the respondents, which are around 70 to 80%, are concerned about issues such as car security, data privacy, and also around legally and financially responsible if the car is involved in collision. And that indicates a need of a framework in Australia for the automated vehicles. Also, people are a bit concerned about manually taking over the car, that is during a disengagement, and the ability to for a car to interact safely with the conventional cars. We found that the majority of respondents are comfortable with only a conditional automation, that is up to level 4, and the perceived safety and trust of the respondents on the automated system is low. In the next slide, we'll be looking at the comparison statistics among the males and female, and we found that males are more optimistic in compared to females. Females were consistently found to be more reluctant, and the high reluctance can be attributed to the less exposure, which is indicated across responses in the survey. Males were also found to be consistently displayed a higher level of awareness in comparison to the females. Males exhibited a higher level of agreement and safety benefits in comparison to the females, and higher percentage of males feel comfortable in using a fully automated car in comparison to females. In the next session, we will be looking into 2 interesting responses which we recorded. Although females are more reluctant to use automated systems, however, they are willing to pay more in comparison to the men. The another interesting result which we found was that women are more reluctant in allowing their children to ride the car by themselves, which was indicated twice in the survey. In the next section, we also look into the case priorities and what consumer market can be targeted by the OEMs and mobility providers. And we see that respondents are eager to use automated cars in case where they are not able to drive by themselves. And the two particular cases which showed up in the survey was the license cancellation and the physical impairment. Lastly, the survey was also recorded for the use case priorities among the shared autonomous vehicles, and majority of the respondents prefer to use a fully automated public transport or ride-sharing services over a conventional human-driven public transport if it is cheaper, safer, and available on demand. Now I'll hand it over to Francis for the summary of this survey.
Thanks, Monica. So just some key points to finish up from what we've talked about. So we did see a lack of confidence in using AVs across those three different points. People's ownership or people's experience with the low-level AV functions is increasing. People were less comfortable traveling by public transport and rideshare due to COVID, but there's also been a shift in support for fully automated vehicles because of it. And then the majority of respondents prefer to use fully automated or public transport ride sharing over the conventional options if it's cheaper, safe, and available on demand, and that males are more optimistic compared to females. So females are more willing to pay compared to males. Next slide, please, Niraj. Just the last point to finish off. So we do actually have other surveys that we do within ADVI and ARRB. So one is our youth survey. So we've conducted this twice, 2019 and last year as well. So this is similar to the public opinion survey, but is based towards those aged 13 to 15 years old, so the younger audience. And we also have the economic uplift survey, which is a survey of ADVI's 150 plus partner organisations on what their current and future level of investment, their employment patterns, and also the last one we did, we asked what the impact of COVID had on them doing business. So if you want to find out any more information about those surveys, you can contact one of us, or you can head to the ADVI website as well for information. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Niraj, Malika, and Francis. That's really great. Great succinct reporting on what is quite a big body of work that you've all undertaken. I think it's really important to understand where the public attitudes are going and what impact COVID's had. And we'll come back and ask some questions about that later. So now I would like to introduce Devin Gladden from the AAA in the US. Devin is the AAA's manager for federal affairs, and his focus is on technology and energy, very topical issues. We'll be hearing about the vehicle technology area. So in the vehicle space, his role covers cybersecurity, deployment of electric vehicles, and safety and regulations for automated vehicles. So thanks very much, Devin. We look forward to hearing your presentation.
Devin, you just need to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
It's all clear.
Okay, sorry about that. So again, my name is Devin Gladden. I'm the manager for federal affairs for AAA National. And AAA has been involved with understanding consumer sentiment on automated vehicles and automated driver assistance features in vehicles since around 2016. And we learned a lot over that time, and I'm happy to share results of our latest survey, which was conducted in February of this year. So to start, AAA through the Foundation for Traffic Safety has undertaken a study in 2018 to really understand what the potential reductions in crashes, injuries, and deaths could be from large-scale deployment of automated driver assistance systems. And it was quite remarkable that given the advancement in the technology, if used properly, we could see a dramatic reduction in these incidents that really can alter the lives of many people on our roads. So for AAA, This is really the foundation of why we're interested in understanding advanced technologies, and in particular, the driver assistance systems give American drivers their first really engagement with advanced technologies and understanding how they can be used, if safe, to enhance the driving experience and make roads safer. But there still are some key challenges that have to be addressed, and this is where our survey has been very useful. In particular, where we want to understand how public attitudes and understanding of these vehicles has evolved over time, particularly as we've seen new capabilities emerge, but really also understanding the limitations. And that's really critical as you see drivers start to use and rely on these systems. We really have tried to understand from a technology standpoint, where do we see the boundaries of that technology use? And really further, how do we see consumers engaging with them and understanding their use that could potentially lead to those reductions in injuries that we saw. So for our 2021 survey, we wanted to take a different approach because in previous iterations of the survey, we were very much focused on the in-car experience. But what we have seen as the US market has developed, particularly around long haul and short distance delivery applications, that the first interaction for most American drivers may actually be sharing the road with these vehicles. And so for this particular survey, we wanted to understand how drivers and are really understanding what the potential might be. And as you can see, it was pretty interesting that most drivers still see, particularly for self-driving semi-trucks, they actually believe that the roads will be less safe because they're sharing the roads with these vehicles. And as you can see with smaller self-delivery vehicles and also on highways or freeways or local roads or neighborhood roads, there's still a high level of concern about sharing the road with these vehicles, which from a policy standpoint is critical because you have to think of the automated vehicles as an additional road user, and how are we safely integrating the use of that technology with existing road users. But as we've also seen, driver interest in these safety systems remains very high. So in some ways, American drivers understand that there are these benefits that come from using the technology, but seeing it in additional applications has made them quite leery, particularly as you reach further into higher levels of automation. But we see that drivers, and when we ask this question about how high is your interest in these safety systems in relation to future vehicles that you may purchase, they're still very much interested in them. And so that just underscores that American interest remains high, but there's still many questions around application and use. In particular, we asked, what might be some interesting factors that would help to increase public acceptance of these vehicles. And the first item we noted was that, clear markings that give people a sense of that the vehicle that they are sharing the road with is actually automated was very high, it's #1 on the list. And in some ways, it also serves as a way to demarcate for folks that they're dealing with a new technology that ordinarily, in terms of communication styles between drivers, they may be asked to do something different. What reason for the clear markings is so that they understand that there may not be a human in the car for them to have that ordinary communication with, and so they may have to react differently. The second is a really critical point that's often missed. Obviously, we were asking about infrastructure and how that might support future deployment, but the public rated very, very high as their second highest consideration for public policy consideration that would support deployment as designated lanes. if you take this a step further, for obviously in the U.S. right now, we're having a major conversation about infrastructure improvement. But one thing that's often lacking from that conversation is the role of infrastructure in advanced technology deployment. And in some ways, you see some states starting to experiment with these special lanes that also can feed in additional communications technology that allow the vehicles to operate autonomously, but also as you think about, again, the integration of these automated vehicles into the fleet, if the vehicles don't have any way for them to communicate with each other and their different technology types, that would be very alarming for the average driver. And so this is why currently drivers do believe that having a designated lane for self-driving vehicles is really, really critical to make sure that there is a safety barrier there. Lastly, drivers believe that time restrictions on when these vehicles are allowed to use the road would also be a critical factor in supporting their deployment. This might also play a critical role as we see more future deployments of semi-trucks, which some companies are looking at platooning, which could bring 3 or 4 of these autonomous trucks together, and that could create, from a driver's perspective, could create a hazard. And as we know, drivers are concerned about the size and weight limits of these vehicles, whether there's a human or a robot behind the wheel. And so one area where, particularly if you're seeing these vehicles used in a high platooning situation with a large number of deliveries, it might be really critical for policymakers to think about, particularly in the beginning, are there opportunities to restrict when these vehicles are on the road, when there's less density and fewer cars on the road, that could potentially support the deployment if you have it running at night or early in the morning when drivers are less likely to be on the highways. One other critical area with our 2021 survey we wanted to explore was around the AV testing programs. If you follow AV news in this country, you will know that it seems like every other day there's a new company announcing that they're doing another pilot program, or there's another testing opportunity in various states. And because of the lack of a national federal regulatory regime for these vehicles, states have been very eager to support the development of the industry. But as we have found through our survey, only roughly around 1/3 of US drivers actually know that these vehicles are being tested on their roads, which is quite interesting given the number of pilot programs that are happening, as well as the states that are engaged, which, to be honest, are typically forward-leaning, technology-focused states. But what does that mean for the rest of the country, particularly if you're looking at widespread national deployment? We took that question a bit further, and we asked, quite squarely, how do you, from the American driver perspective, what's support of the programs? And as you can see, it's pretty split evenly, but to highlight that there are actually more people, just slightly more, but they are opposed to these programs. And we wanted to understand what were some of the key considerations that would lead someone to actually oppose a testing program. And some of those main concerns were that they were unsure of the safety of sharing the roads. Obviously, liability and responsibility for involvement in a crash is quite critical. And who would actually oversee the self-driving test vehicles? Is it the private company? Is it the state? Is it the police? There's a big question there for the majority of drivers. We also found that there was a high concern around educating the public on how to behave differently when you're sharing the road with these vehicles. That brings to mind that the typical U.S. driver has become accustomed to a number of unwritten rules on the road. And so when you bring in a robot driver, how does that change, particularly when you think about if there's a lack of communication mechanisms between humans and robots? It raises a greater question around what additional technology or education is needed so that drivers can feel that they're sharing the road safely. One other additional note about this particular portion of our survey: this year, AAA was able to partner with the Technology and Public Purpose Project at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at the Kennedy School at Harvard. I was actually a fellow this year through the program, and so we were able to bring together our researchers to do a deeper dive on what might be some of the key challenges ahead, which led us to the elements of public acceptance, which, as you can see, drivers want that the vehicles must be able to demonstrate safe and predictable behavior. And this actually gets into robot behavior and the unwritten rules and the written rules of the road. How will humans are trying to get a real understanding of how are the automated vehicles expected to operate? Are they going to follow our rules? Are they going to do something a little different? There's some concern there, but obviously, as a part of the integration of these vehicles into the national fleet, there needs to be this predictable behavior that, as any other driver would expect from another human driver. That there's that same issue there with the automated vehicles. Second, new technology is often prone to failure. I don't care if you're, I'm a child of the video game era, and I remember, having to blow into Super Nintendo cartridges to get them to work occasionally, but you can't have that same kind of understanding and operational failure when you're in a vehicle. Driving is already a dangerous activity, and so drivers obviously are very much concerned that, particularly if they're a rider or sharing the road, that these vehicles have to be able to operate consistently and safely as they are designed, and if they don't, that in and of itself can create a safety risk. So that it's really, really important that from a technology perspective that they are reliable, and that humans can depend on them and trust them in that way. Third, this concern gets to the heart of liability. The U.S. is quite a litigious country, so it actually is not surprising that drivers really are concerned about who's responsible for a crash with a robot driver. We've never really had that instance in this country where you think about liability from a technology standpoint that's based on a robot that is empowered by technologies that sometimes humans can't fully explain how that machine came to its decision. In particular, when you look at liability cases in this country, often it comes down to facts and who did what and to what extent was the technology engaged, or what actions did the driver take or did not take that led to a crash. But obviously, all of that gets a bit thrown into a new conversation when you add in a robot driver. But clearly, we will need to address that in order to enhance public acceptance. And lastly, these vehicles, because they do have a robot artificial intelligence element that the average human is still trying to understand and grapple with, putting that in a vehicle context, it can add a level of anxiety. And so having that ability to easily identify that these vehicles are being operated by a machine that is not a human, that could require a different communication style, might require a different defensive driving style, that's really important. And so having a key marker that allows drivers to easily know that they're dealing with a different kind of road user will be very important for integrating these vehicles into the national fleet. And thank you so much for your time. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Rita.
Thank you, Devin. Just ask all our presenters to turn their cameras back on. And then we can just, we are getting some questions coming through. I encourage you to put your questions in the question box, and I'll try and get to as many as I can. But I hope that you all, the audience, really appreciate the breadth of work that's going on across the world around understanding the public acceptance. And seems to be a common theme that these surveys all started around about the same time, and really a focus. Well, the technology has been developing exponentially. I think we need to be tracking where the consumer and the customer's opinions are. So I suppose to you, you could go maybe some insights into, if we were to have an international snapshot into public opinion, how do you think we might structure that?
It was so interesting. Thank you for your presentation. And I'd like to do the international survey with you and with a common question. Your question is very similar to our one, so we can do it a common question in the future and compare it. It's very effective for our researchment, I think so. I believe that each of us can get tips and inspiration from the continuous collaboration of our research on increasing social acceptability about the automated driving. So please to collaborate with us in the future.
Thank you. Maybe Devin, there are some common questions that we've seen asked in a slightly different way. So your thoughts on what else we might need to consider if we're looking to have some commonality to be able to do like a snapshot about international comparisons?
Yeah.
Well, I certainly think timing of the surveys would be helpful so that we can get a snapshot that's overlapping in time, and making sure as well that we acknowledge the different regulatory regimes in each country that can also there is some overlap, but there is some difference, and that might also be a key element to understanding how international sentiment is being shaped by the different regulatory regimes.
And Niraj, can I ask you the same question about what you think, having listened to and seen the surveys and the questions, what do you think around what could an international perspective you gain from a collaboration like this?
I think a very interesting insights across the different geographies that we have seen. Maybe even tying it down to the behavior of people, which varies across geographies, as the behavior of people generally here in Australia might be in difference to the other geographies. So combining these survey questionnaires, doing it across geographies, and then also trying to understand what's the core human behavior or attitude that differs across those geographies. So that would be much more insightful for other countries to follow this work.
Right. Devin, you touched on, some of the other challenges and, particularly what do you think, apart from acceptance and building awareness and acceptance, what do you think some of the other challenges are to, getting this deployment of the technology?
Well, that's a very good question. I think there will be two key considerations. The first is that the technology is actually proven to operate as designed reliably. As we have seen in other studies through AAA, the ADAS features sometimes don't work as intended. So for example, automatic emergency braking sometimes doesn't work at night. And if you think about that most pedestrian fatalities occur at night, if humans are relying on this technology in that circumstance and it's failing, that could lead to other sentiment that the technology just is not ready for prime time. And that could be a huge impediment to its use. The other consideration is in our country is the lack of a national regulatory framework for these vehicles. as I noted in my presentation, states have been very eager to support the industry and attract investment. But from a company that's looking to deploy across the country, they want one national regulatory framework, not 50. And so to the extent that we lack the ability to have one national framework, that could be a real impediment to seeing future widespread deployment, because we just don't have the regulations in place to do it.
So I think from an Australian perspective, if I may add, we do have quite a formal approach. We have a National Transport Commission, and we do have agreement around putting national rules in place by 2026 to allow the commercialisation of automated vehicles. But if COVID has shown us one thing, is that the states and territories in Australia are acting independently, and so the confidence around having one rule for one deployment in a country, much as the world, because we know the people developing this technology is going to be deployed across the world. So we really need to understand how we can, make sure that we have a consistent in our own countries, but also around the world. And I think that will lend itself to some of the feedback that we've seen from our surveys, and maybe Monica or Francis, some of the feedback that we've seen from the COVID-19 questions in particular, and responses to that around how attitudes are changing to things like public transport. The other thing is, I thought was quite interesting around the COVID, obviously safe and reliable and not as expensive, but the other part is on demand. So maybe, is that a way to build the confidence of people by providing an on-demand aspect, or promoting the on-demand? And Yukiko, I will ask you too about your trial that you said with the community, the success of that around getting the community involved. I'll ask you that after. So Francis or Monica?
About community, it's very difficult. It also at the rural area is very have the difficulty of the community. So to make the consensus within the community is very difficult about the automated driving, I think. But the COVID-19 has caused tremendous travel restriction. And I think many of us experienced how happy we were to move freely. So it's very good timing to involve the people up to this argument about the automated driving now. So through the automated driving, we can remake or reconstruct our community, I think. So we have to discuss about it. So that's why I said that the co-creation, the place of co-creation is needed, I think.
And are you seeing that in Japan, and Devin, are you seeing that in the US, that there's more customer-centric involvement into some of the technology that's being developed, or are we still a bit behind?
I don't know. I don't think so. It's very difficult.
That's a very interesting question. So I do think some of the pilot programs have given developers greater insight into the consumer needs. But I'll be honest, I don't think we've seen enough of that widespread across the country to get a true snapshot of national sentiment for what consumers may want or need. But I think we're getting there. But I also think the most consumers and drivers and other road users, they're expecting the government to be, because of how regulated our auto industry is in this country, they're expecting the government to have their hand on this. And I think that the lack of the unitary framework could potentially be another way in which consumers are falsely relying on what they believe is that the government is there and is doing greater work but the reality is it's not quite there yet. And so that could also be another challenge that we see over the coming years as we start to form greater interest into what insight into what consumer sentiment is in this country.
Maybe if I can throw to Francis, just about, you mentioned the other surveys that ADVI's done, particularly the youth survey, maybe some insights into, you know, what the young people who might not be included in these surveys for ethical reasons, some insights into whether their views are different to what we've heard expressed from more, from, you know, the over 18.
Yeah, sure. I think just as a brief summary of that survey, I think, you know, we sort of were expecting to see that age group, the 13 to 15-year-olds, I guess, be more supportive or more accepting of the technology. But we didn't really see that. It was fairly similar to what the older age group, you know, 18 and above, found. It's sort of, I guess, the similar concerns, similar safety concerns. I guess, which kind of shows us, at least in this country here in Australia, New Zealand, I think we sort of need to do a better job about educating, you know, the younger people about the technology, how it's progressing, how it's getting better, and yeah, how that's sort of going to be what the future is like as well. So yeah, similar findings to what we found in this public opinion survey.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking at the time, and thank you. Just wanted to thank all our speakers and presenters, everybody that's tuned in. It's been a great discussion. I'm sure we'll follow up on, you know, looking at how we can get the international insights and maybe combining questions in our surveys and timing. Thank you, Yukiko-san. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Niraj, Francis, and Amolika. Thank you to all of you. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. I just wanted to thank you very much and also let you know that our next webinar will be on September the 9th, and it's around the ethics of automated vehicles. So enjoy the rest of your day wherever this may find you, and thank you very much for joining in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.